Hello everyone, it's Gigabeef here, and today we're checking out which weapons we can run suppressed right from the start of a new wipe, beginning with the newly modelled PB pistol. At 21,000 rubles from Prapor 1, this is the cheapest suppressed weapon in the game right now, as it comes all in one package, and one really nice upside to it is that because it was designed to be suppressed right from the start, the irons on this are usable over the top. If you're just trying to get quests done and want to take out scavs without making any sound, this could be a decent option, but do be aware of its limited mag capacity, as at the end of the day it is pretty much just a PB pistol. This will benefit from the new pistol quick swap mechanic though, so it might be worth bearing in mind if you want to take it in as a sidearm. By default this is double press 1, so make sure to change it if you've rebound your sidearm keybind like I have. The next most obvious choice with no restrictions is the standalone 366 suppressor on skier level 1. As this only fits to weapons chambered in 366, this limits us to the semi-automatic VPO-209 and the bolt-action VPO-215. As these fire relatively powerful ammunition for the early wipe, they can actually be really good. You may have noticed that raids feel much more alive at the beginning of a new patch, and part of this is down to the lack of suppressors in general, and it gives out a ton of information for figuring out where players are, how many are in each direction, and what they might be doing, such as looting med camp on woods or hitting new gas on customs. By having one of these suppressors on a VPO early, you can be hard hitting and not give away this free information to your opponents as well, which can be a real game changer when the maps are full of PMCs. If I'm investing in a suppressor on the 209, I do like to make sure that I have at least a sight, which we can do by adding a bastion top rail from skier 1 after removing the rear irons. Sights are very limited early on, and I usually pick the Cobra EKP from Jaeger plus the shades to gain 1 ergonomics overall with a decent reticle, as I find the MRS too floaty, the PKO6 too fuzzy, and the Aimpoint H2 a bit too expensive. The Burris is another option that looks pretty good, but ultimately it's personal preference. These days you can't really do anything else to the 209. In the past we'd add an AK-100 handguard, but these aren't available at the start anymore, so this is basically it. The 215 is similar, slap on the suppressor, pick a sight, and you're basically good to go. I tend to use the 215 for completing Tarkov shooter at the beginning, and initially you're not even allowed to use a sight, so having the suppressor really helps to plink away at scavs without getting interrupted by PMCs coming over to pick a fight, versus using something like the Mosin. You can even take the rail off completely, which makes the iron sight slightly easier to see through, and I personally find the 215 iron sight really nice to use anyway. The only real sniping scope, if you can call it that, is the Pilad 4x32 on Jaeger, which fits into the UTG 25mm ring mount. Despite being an awful optic in general, it's often completely sold out, because it is really the only available 4 times in cash for players under level 15, and often something is better than nothing. You could actually use this on the 209 as well if you wanted to, but the increased accuracy of the 215 lends itself a little bit more to shooting over longer ranges. These two weapons work really well with the EKO round, which at 30 penetration is one of the highest penetrating bullets that you can actually buy from level 1 traders, so they are actually really effective. Moving on to 2 slightly less obvious choices, we have the TT pistol as well as the M1911. The reason that this is not initially apparent is that you have to mod the TT from Prapor 1 using a homespun threaded barrel that is available on Mechanic 1 and buy his makeshift sound suppressor as well for 17k to attach it. This is more expensive than the PB pistol that we looked at before, and it has the issue that we mentioned previously. Because this one wasn't intended for use with this suppressor, the front irons are below the lip, which makes it really hard to aim accurately, especially in ADS. To make up for this slightly, you can use the TT laser module again from Mechanic 1, but I personally would rather be able to ADS effectively versus using a laser, so depending on which playstyle you prefer, the choice is there. The other alternative pistol, the M1911, is very similar in concept to the TT. Swap the barrel using Peacekeeper's M1911 threaded version, and onto this you can attach a Silencer Omega 45k piston mount adapter from Mechanic. Once this is on, the Silencer Omega again from Mechanic is available to be equipped. This is one of the most expensive options, which at an eye-watering 43k is not really ideal for the early wipe, but the M1911's .45 ammo is actually pretty good. Match FMJ deals 72 damage and 25 pen, which isn't an instant penetrate through class 3, but it's as close as you're going to get with pistol cartridges early on. We do have the irons problem again, and although a laser or flashlight can be added through the NC Star trigger guard mount, at this stage you're really starting to spend a lot of money. If you really wanted to go wild and pimp this guy out to the maximum, you can use the Mech-Gar 11 round mags as well to improve upon the standard 7 shots, but for me this is all a little too much for a pistol. Interestingly, the Omega suppressor fits to a few other weapons as well, but unfortunately we can't get access to them easily. Another .45 pistol, the USP, can also have the threaded barrel to equip this suppressor, but the weapon isn't purchasable until level 2 traders. Even then, you have to buy the specific version with the threaded barrel already attached, because it just doesn't exist as a standalone part. The other adapter that is compatible with the Omega is the direct thread mount adapter, which allows it to be used with the Vector, which is obviously not purchasable straight away, but also with the UMP. Unfortunately, the mount is mechanic 2 by itself anyway, and the only way you can get it to fit is using the UMP's threaded barrel 2, which is on Peacekeeper 2. So next up we have the AKS-74UB from Prapor 1 after completing debut. This is Prapor's very first quest, so unlocks almost straight away, and at 71k is kind of pricey, but 545 can be extremely good early wipe. This version comes with a PVS-4 suppressor, one of the standards for 545 weapons, but unlike the full-length AKs, the shorty models have a vertical foregrip compatible handguard available right at the beginning in the B11. While early on this is not actually that important on most guns due to the limited selection of foregrips and the minimum recoil control that they actually give when compared to something like muzzles and stocks, in this situation, because the suppressor erodes our ergonomics quite heavily, attaching even the basic VFG foregrip from Peacekeeper 1 is quite beneficial to bring ergonomics back up. One fun thing about the UB is that it handles extremely well, with slightly lower horizontal recoil than its equivalents, and because of some buffs last wipe to its base stats, actually has less recoil than its longer brothers like the AK-74M at the same level of modding. I'd argue that this is probably the best 545 weapon well through into the mid game, so if you're looking for peak performance, then this is probably it. Optics are also incredibly flexible on this weapon, as the dovetail rail gives the option to use pretty much whatever you want, but if for some reason you prefer the classic 74U optic mounting system, you can just buy the regular dust cover instead for pennies and attach the B18 mount to the top. As always, 545 ammo is very powerful early on because you can get level 2 and 3 trader ammo in raid often, which allows you to use things like 545 BT. With 42 pen, this all but guarantees the defeat of class 4 even on the very first shot. My advice would be to give this weapon a go once you've found some of the better ammunition and stack your mags with 10 rounds of the good stuff at the top. This justifies paying the premium price for the suppressed version of the UB. Outside of these, there are a few barters that can be done depending on what you find in raid. The Kedda B is tradable for 3 cleaner bottles, which is a great SMG with a high rate of fire, but finding 3 of the same items limits how much you can do of this. The Osprey 9x19 suppressor on the other hand is one of the better ones, only needing a drill, and this one fits directly to the PP19, which is one of my new favourite early wipe weapons as it's come to Prapor 1 for rubles. The Osprey does fit to other guns as well, but most of them have some issue, such as the MP5, which requires a lug suppressor adapter and mechanic 2. The MPX also works, but this time the actual weapon itself is at Peacekeeper 2. The other standalone barter on mechanic is the Alpha 9 for 2 salts. This isn't compatible with the PP19, but it does fit to quite a few of the pistols, going onto the M9 directly, as well as the PM, P226R, and the Glock if you purchase the threaded barrels that are available at level 1 traders. This is a funny little suppressor with a rail on top that avoids the iron sight problems by allowing you to run your own reflex at the front of the weapon. Interestingly, only optics with mounts will fit here, so your choices are pretty limited to either the Burris or the Aimpoint H2 at the beginning, and I personally really dislike attaching these so close to the end of the gun due to how they lose sight picture not only when you fire, but even just as you move about. There are a handful of other barters on Mechanic 1 directly, but these are not normally worth doing. Pre-fleet, it's pretty unusual to find the specific combination of barter items that he's looking for, and typically once you get to the fleet, it's also not economic to purchase these weapons with this method. But if you are really keen, the modded MPX, MP7 and MP5 SD, which is useful for Gunsmith, are technically available this way too. So as usual, a big shout out to all my patrons, and as always, have fun in your raids.